So excited to talk to our guest here. I've been talking with our booker for weeks. I'm like, when are you going to get Tom Hopper on my show? He says, I'm working on it. I said, okay. And then I get the confirmation. And there's so much to talk to Tom about, because my favorite show right now is The Umbrella Academy. We'll get to that here in a second. Tom wants to, first off, talk about this rom-com. This giant, good-looking man is taking his British accent to Netflix, which is actually already out now, by the way, with a rom-com. Tom, you're a rom-com guy now.
Apparently so. Apparently so. Yeah, I didn't know that was going to happen, to be honest. So I got a meeting with Mark Steven Johnson, the writer director, and he offered me this movie, and I said to him, I was like, this is a new one for me. It's a bit of I've not really done this before. And he was like, no, you'll be perfect for it, man. I know you'll be great. And I was like, how do you know? Like, I've not done anything like this before. How do you know I'm going to be okay in this movie? So I was quite apprehensive, but I read the script, and actually my wife read the script first, and she loved it, and she was like, you should definitely do this movie.
That's crazy. That's crazy for your wife. Now I get it. You're an actor, and this is your trade. This is your talent. This is what you do. But this rom-com, which, by the way, again, you can find this on Netflix right now. It's called Love in the Villa. My wife and I are going to watch it this weekend. She's a rom-com fan, and I got to be honest with you, so am I. I love them. But there's this young woman, Kat Graham, multi-talented, extremely gorgeous Kat Graham. She takes this trip to Italy after a breakup. And then, pretty much you and her get stuck in the same room because it's double booked, and then love ensues. It's a fantastic premise. But I'm looking at you, and this is the same guy, Luther from the Umbrella Academy, Game of Thrones, and Black Sails, and you're this big dude, and you're like a teddy bear in this. And your wife okayed it, and she's also in this. She's got to watch you kiss Kat Graham.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, but my wife's very understanding. Yeah, when you think about it, when she's actually pushing me in to do a rom-com, it's like, why would you do that? But she thought it was great for me. So, and actually, she ended up auditioning for one of the roles, my wife, in the movie, one of the supporting leads, and she smashed it out of the park. And Mark Steven Johnson was like, "Is this your wife?" She said, "Do." So she ended up getting a role in the movie. So Laura's in it with me, which was amazing. That we got to be in a movie together.
Now, would you greenlight her being in a movie where her love interest is a good-looking, guy, and you've got to watch, and you're in the movie too, so you got to watch your wife do lovey scenes with some guy? Would you be okay with that?
Well, if I'm in the movie too, then I can keep an eye on how the relationship goes off camera, can't I? So I have slightly more control. But no, I mean, the thing is, like, me and my wife are very, we're both actors, we're both very trusting, and we have a very strong relationship. So that side of things is actually something we've never really worried too much about, But she had to go through an Umbrella Academy season 4. I had a whole love story with the lovely Genesis Rodriguez.
Don't spoil anything. I haven't even gotten to season 3 yet. Please.
Oh, you're in the middle of it. Well, there you go. You've got a trailer.
Oh my! Like I know that you have you've been infatuated with your sister Allison the entire time, but I know that's because when doing prep for this conversation, I ran into some spoilers about Sloane Hargraves, which is played by Genesis Rodriguez, who was the antagonist, the bad girl in Identity Thief. I think the name was Marcel. Yeah. So she's a really good actress, and they're part of a different academy called the Sparrow Academy. And that's all I know, and that's my spoiler. I read it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Well, it's a good season. You'll enjoy it.
Oh, I know. And I heard it ends after 4, right?
The 4th season, yeah, we just announced the 4th and final. Yeah, so we go to shoot that beginning of next year.
Look, you do realize, okay, I don't get addicted to shows very often, Tom. I have fallen in love with the Umbrella Academy. Whoever sat down one night and wrote this script, whatever they're taking, I want some of it, because it is the trippiest, some of the best acting, some of the best character building that I've seen in a show in a very long time.
Yeah, and we're super fortunate, man. We've got an amazing writer in Steve Blackman, the head showrunner, who has all the mad ideas for our show, you know. And if you're not even in season 3 yet, then you're going to really enjoy season 3, because it's even wackier and it takes you on some real journeys. So, and the character development's brilliant this season. So, yeah, the thing is, you never know what you're going to get with Umbrella Academy. You know, you never know which turn it's going to take. One thing Steve always talked about is subversion. You know, you kind of take the audience on a journey, and then you subvert all the rules. So you can kind of go anywhere with that show, which is part of the brilliance of being on it. You know, we're very lucky to be on a show like, you get to do so many cool things.
When I see the head of the commission is a talking goldfish, smoking a cigarette, blowing smoke rings. I mean, I'm like, dude, I consider myself a fairly creative guy, but that's just out of the park creativity. And he's the boss, right? It's like,
yeah, I know, right?
Do you guys sit around on set and just go, dude, what is he talking about right now? There's a talking monkey, there's a talking goldfish, and I'm a hairy half ape, half man. What did I get myself into on this one?
Well, the thing is, we kind of knew that it was going to be somewhat wacky, because it all came from a graphic novel, and the graphic novel has a lot of that stuff in there, and it's pretty bonkers actually at times, the graphic novel. So it's kind of being true to that world, but then taking it further in than what's on the page. You know, like the character development is taken much further. And the wackiness really is, you know, there's lots of elements of the show that aren't in the graphic novel, but it's still all very much within that world.
Is there another character on the Umbrella Academy, Tom, that you would have rather played other than Luther?
Rather played, no. I love playing Luther so much, you know, and he's become kind of a part of me now. I even named my dog after him. I love playing him. He's because the thing is, like you say, the character development's so good in this show that you kind of get pretty deep into it. So they become part of you, these characters. But I have to say, there's other characters on the show that I've loved. You know, I really liked Hazel in the first season, the assassin Hazel, who fell in love with the older lady in the diner.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, Five is a phenomenal character, and Aidan plays him so well.
Yeah.
So as characters go, like they're pretty fun ones to do.
Claus is just, I mean, that guy is so eclectic, eccentric. I mean, you name it. And I watched the interview that you and Robert Sheehan did with something online, and he's not that far off, at least in that interview. I mean, he wasn't in character, but he's a pretty eccentric, eclectic guy in real life too, isn't he?
Yeah, Rob. I mean, Rob's one of my best friends, so I know Rob very well, and yeah, he's very eccentric. Yeah, what I love about being friends with Rob is you never know what's coming next. You know, like, in conversations can go off on a complete tangent. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, I did the press for Umbrella Academy season 3 with him in LA, so we were paired up, and then he turns up with a cockatoo. He turns up with a real life cockatoo for the interviews. I'm like, of course he's got a cockatoo. Why would I expect anything less? So, you know, he's kind of wacky, and he's perfect for Klaus. But the thing is, Klaus is only Klaus because Robert Sheehan is playing him. The Klaus that everyone has fallen in love with is the only reason that is because it's Robert Sheehan. He's brought, and that's the thing with all those characters. We have all brought ourselves to those characters, and Steve Blackman, our showrunner, has cast them very well because he sees the potential, and then he starts writing more for our strengths, you know, and like more of what the strengths we have as actors. So I think it's very well cast, our show.
How long does it take you to put on the suit? Because I mean, I know you're a big guy in general, but I know you're not that big. So you got the muscle suit to put on. Is it a pain in the ass every day?
Well, we're fairly fortunate because there's two versions of that suit. So there's the prosthetic one when you see me with no clothes on and I've just got the big torso suit. That takes like 2.5 hours to put on. So you just sat in the chair while they're gluing you and painting you into that because it's hands and neck and everything. And then fortunately we have a sort of zip-on suit that goes on underneath the clothes, and that takes like 2 minutes to put on. So that's the one I'm wearing, day to day. But for the first season, it was much harder than that. First season, it was like I was kind of in it in the morning, and I kind of just stayed in it. But we managed to adapt it to make it much easier to get on and off.
And so I think what I was reading as I get into season 3, and I'm sure, I talk about the Umbrella Academy on this show from time to time, and I try not to give away spoilers, but I didn't know this. So Elliot Page, who plays Vanya, is transgender. She came out a couple years ago, and the show is going to cater to that, and I think that's genius because right now she identifies as a female as far as her character goes, but as the show progresses, she will identify as a male to the character Victor Hargraves, correct?
That's correct, yes. Elliot transitioned before we started shooting season 3. And he obviously spoke to Steve Blackman and the Netflix and, said what his intentions were. And Steve said, do you want the character to transition? And he said, yeah. So, and it works beautifully in the show. It's brilliant. And it was synonymous with us kind of learning of his transition as well as the characters doing it for Victor. So it was quite an interesting sort of process really for us all, but it was beautiful. It was really well handled.
Yeah, I thought that was clever, just reading it and then thinking about it going, because there are people that are transitioning or that have transitioned, whatever. And if they're in this line of work, if you can build that into their character on the show and they're comfortable with that, of course, I think that's ingenious because you can play two totally different people and knock it out of the park both times.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's the brilliance of this is that they're not different people, right? They're the same person, and the way that it's been handled is that they just transition their gender, but the person they are is exactly the same. So, like Elliot is exactly the same as when he identified as Ellen as a female. And they're exactly the same, and it's the same as like Victor and Vanya. There's no change in character. They are the same person. They just change gender. And that's kind of what it is so beautiful about how it's been handled.
Yeah. I can see something like the Umbrella Academy, Tom, having numerous spin-offs. Have you heard any rumblings about that? I just don't see you letting, or not you, but the writers or Netflix letting this franchise go. I see merchandise. I see action figures. I see this bigger, and I'm usually a guy that'll say, all right, let's stop at like 6 seasons. Walking Dead has totally jumped the shark. It's gone too far. Let's get out while we're on top. But 4 seasons of the Umbrella Academy, I think there's more to tell.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think there's a potential for spin-offs with the show. Obviously, I think so much depends on how the show ends. They could obviously do like prequel versions of it. They could do something with the Sparrow Academy, which you'll learn about when you get into season 3. Yeah, I suppose within the Umbrella Academy world, yeah, you definitely could. I think we feel that the show is the right time to finish this story of these characters after season 4, because there's only so many times that you can do the apocalypse, the impending apocalypse of the world and all that sort of thing. And it still be interesting and doing it in new, interesting ways. So you got to kind of develop new ways of doing that. But like you say, I think getting out when you're on a high, like finishing high, I've always been a big fan of doing that. I don't think you want to drag on a show too much. too many shows do that, and audiences get bored. And I think I'd rather leave people wanting more, but like leave them satisfied but wanting more. You know.
Well, what the show did going into season 2, it took like. Did you ever watch Quantum Leap with Scott Bakula back in the day?
Of course, yeah, one of my faves.
Oh yeah, mine too. And I've always thought that, you know, again, I'm not a huge reboot guy, but you could totally reboot that. And I've thought of a million different ways to do it. And that's kind of the vibe that I got going into season 2 when you all transported back into the 60s. And then you brought in the JFK assassination. And then you've got what is it, the Franklin film that you're looking at?
Yeah.
And you're then like, oh my God, Dad's on the grassy knoll. We've got to stop Dad. You know, so it's like
the idea that like they transitioned, like they crossed over real life events with our involvement, you know, really well, and the idea that Dad, like Reggie Hargreaves, maybe something to do with the assassination and stuff. It was all very clever.
Yeah. The scene in season 2 where the handler is in the pet store and she's talking to the little chubby redheaded kid. I thought that was like a younger Hazel, but I guess the timeline wouldn't match up with that. He wouldn't have been born in the 60s.
No, he wouldn't have been born yet.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been born yet. But that was my first thought. I'm like, this is it. You know, is there a young Hazel? There's a young Cha-Cha played by Mary.
That'd be a fun Easter egg though.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, the little Easter egg thrown in there. Nate, do you have a question for Tom Hopper, Nate?
Yeah, Tom, I haven't got into the Umbrella Academy yet, so I apologize, but I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, and you had an awesome death. At least you got to be killed by a dragon. But I was curious, how does the UK receive Game of Thrones? Are they into it as much as the US is, or did we do you guys justice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is with Thrones is kind of worldwide, you know, like it's such an enormous monster of a show. And me and my wife, Laura, went to the premiere of the House of Dragon in London recently, and you could see from that premiere, like how massive the franchise is now. You know, it's not just that one show. Any of the shows spin off from that entity, the brand that is Game of Thrones, is probably going to do very well. So it's enormous here, man, just as big as it is in the States.
I can see, you know, with this is why I'm excited about this conversation, Tom, because you're going to be such a big star. Like, you're going to be untouchable in the next year or two, as far as action movies go. I mean, you can do it all. You got the look, you got the skill, you're just the total acting package. I'm assuming with the success of the Umbrella Academy, the success of the things that you've done, the future success of Love in the Villa on Netflix, which again is out currently. Is there anything in the works as far as a big motion picture starring Tom Hopper?
Well, actually, my big thing at the minute is I'm just going into the beginning of 2020. Me and my wife started our production company, and we're producing 3 or 4 different movies that are all starting to come together. One is with Netflix, one is we're working with other bigger companies in the States, but I can't announce them yet because they're not allowed to be announced. But I'm trying to get to the producing side because, you know, I like to. I'm all about like trying to build things from seed. You know, like I like the idea of collaboration with a great team of people and putting things together. So that's been a huge focus of mine in the last year, and putting all that together. And that's all we're starting to, you know, really see the fruition of that now, and it all come together with various different movies, some action, you know, a couple of comedies and some, but yeah, a lot of action comedy and then straight up action as well. So, but yes, that's been my main focus. But there's always going to be like the other movies on the side, like you say, like the kind of blockbuster type stuff. I'm always going to have my eye on that field. Yeah. But as an actor, I'm always looking for a challenge, and the producing side of it is a huge challenge for me, and that's just why I took it on. But yeah, I'm always going to be looking for those other jobs out there that I go, that could be a lot of fun. For me, it's all about the on-set experience and how much fun I'll have with it. I think the wrong thing to do as an actor is to look for fame and fortune, or like, you know, the just like a major success of like, oh, I want that job because of success. For me, I want to know what the experience I'm going to have on it, if it's going to be fun. And that's why I do all these things, because I think I'll have a good time. That's what we're doing in life, right? We're looking to have fun. So that's the way I like to see my career, and try and just do it that way.
Wow, that's motivational. That's profound. That's Socrates. That's putting on a t-shirt stuff. That's really good. I like it. I buy into it. Is there someone that you do want to work with? Like, I could see you fighting The Rock, you know, in some kind of, like, maybe joining the Hobbs, whatever the spinoff of the Fast and Furious stuff is. I can see you joining that as a bad guy. I think you'd play a really good bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always up for playing the villain. You know, the villains are often the more interesting characters, right? So, yeah, I mean, I would certainly be up for that. But I think the heroes in my life are the ones that I grew up watching, right? So Arnold Schwarzenegger is a huge hero of mine, because, you know, Terminator was a massive influence in my early years. And then I would love to work with like Christopher Lloyd, you know, like I'm a massive Back to the Future fan. It's my number one. So he's not like up there in terms of like, you know, like you say, like Dwayne Johnson, but for me personally, like I want to work with my heroes. Yeah. So him and Michael J. Fox are two of my major heroes. And same as Arnold Schwarzenegger.
You and I share that love of Back to the Future. My grandmother, she's no longer with us, but when she was my rock, you know, she was my everything. And the last movie that I saw with her was Back to the Future at the Annapolis Mall in Annapolis, Maryland. And ever since then, just it's been like this weird universe connection with Back to the Future. And you know that movie almost was not made. Every single movie house passed on it. Production, they're like, we don't. This is silly. This is stupid. A guy gets in a DeLorean and goes back. This is dumb. It was almost not existent. And Michael J. Fox wasn't even the first guy up for the role. It was Eric Stoltz.
I know. The whole thing nearly didn't have him in it.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy how stuff like that works out in Hollywood when you go and you're like, oh, it was almost this guy, and it was almost this guy.
Yeah, Will Smith was going to be Neo in The Matrix.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another. I love stuff like that. Those fun facts. Was there somebody else? Obviously, there had to have been somebody else you beat out. Obviously, for the Luther character in Umbrella Academy.
Well, actually, you know, I found out recently that wasn't the case, because you like any job, you audition and you think, you know, there's going to be like 100 of the dudes that are looking at. This is why I'm so grateful to Game of Thrones and the platform that it kind of gave me, because so many people watch it. So Steve Blackman, the showrunner, and he only told me this recently, but he saw me on Game of Thrones. And was like, you know what, he could be our Luther. And he got me to audition to see if I could do an American accent and obviously do the scenes. And he said, you were the first tape we saw. And then I said, that's the guy. And I had a meeting with him. He put me forward to Netflix. And fortunately, Ted, our executive, was in a similar position that he'd seen me on Thrones, and was like, yeah, I like his work and everything. He'd be great for Luther. Saw my tape. Met with Steve Blackman, and then that was that. And they never looked at, well, according to Steve, you know, never looked at other Luthers. So I feel incredibly lucky and fortunate that, and thank you to Game of Thrones for that. You know, that they gave me that platform to put me on Steve's radar.
Well, Game of Thrones was so big, you know, and if you have you steal the show at any point in time, you know, in any episode, people are going to take notice. And so that's, you know, just a compliment to you. How difficult was it to lock down the English accent, the American accent?
The American, well, it's funny because, I mean, I work very hard on it, you know, because for me, I have to I have to be as authentic as possible. You know, I'm diligent in my work rate and things like that. So I'll spend a lot of time on working with accent, and I'm also have no ego about it. If someone I want my castmates who are American to pull me up on something if they hear a little nuance that isn't quite there. So, you know, I'm speaking their accent, so I need them to help me out. But I've been very fortunate that, you know, as a Brit, I grew up on American television and American movies. So I've been listening to American accents since the day I can remember watching my first movie. You know, I can talk about Back to the Future. I talk about Terminator. You know, all these American accents. And I was also hugely into. I was a massive Friends fan. I've watched every episode of Friends like 10, 15 times probably. So in terms of like listening to that conversational chat and the nuances in the way to speak as an American, you know, I've been around it just from immersion watching television for so long from America.
That's funny. You should pitch next time you're on set that all of your castmates from the Umbrella Academy, you do a spoof video of the intro to Friends with everybody from the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah. There's a lot of chat about Friends on our set because I think most of us are like of that era. We're like in our early 30s, you know. So a lot of us, well, no, I'm in my late 30s now, but there's a lot of chat about the similarities, and we always talk about which character on the show is which character on Friends. Who's who?
You're Ross, obviously, right?
Yeah, Luther's a Ross. Yeah, I think Diego is Joey.
Joey,
and Klaus is Chandler.
Chandler. Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt, hands down. And 5 would be the barista at Central Perk. He just passed, sadly enough.
Yeah, 5 would be Gunther. Yeah,
Gunther. Yeah. What about, you talk about movies, American movies, and so on and so forth. What about music? Did you grow up listening to American artists or European artists?
Both, actually. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like a lot of classic rock. Like I love the Stones, I love Queen, Leonard Skinner, Aerosmith, and then, you know, like more modern Brit like Kasabian, Oasis. I'm a big fan of. Love Audio Slave, Rage Against the Machine. You know, I grew up on those kind of bands. I just watched Trainwreck. The 99 Woodstock documentary on Netflix recently. Yeah. And that brought back a lot of memories because I was at a lot of those kind of festivals. And to be honest, a lot of it, I was like, this was kind of like a lot of festivals I went to that were kind of exactly the same as this until it got really bad on like the Saturday night when girls were getting raped and shit. I was like, oh, that's not at all like I used to go to. Yeah, that festival got way out of hand.
Blame it all on Limp Bizkit, right? He's like, no, do not play stuff.
I know.
I'm trying to get. So I've interviewed Gavin Rossdale from Bush over the years. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he was like one of the only ones that kind of calmed it down, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, but not on purpose. He was, you know, Bush. I'm trying to get him on the podcast to talk about this because I never realized that any other time I've spoken to him to even bring it up. But Bush was the act to follow Limp Bizkit. And the promoters were like,
well, Korn, wasn't it? On the first night, they followed Korn.
Oh, they followed Korn, yeah, on the first night. And they're, you know, the promoters were like, you know, thank God, you know. And Bush, you know, Machine Head is a pretty up-tempo song, but at the time, you know, Korn and Limp Bizkit, that new metal stuff was the new Metallica, was the new Anthrax, was the new, you know, Slayer. And we were those angry frat guys with our shirts off and our khaki cargos with the belt and our underwear showing, their hats on backwards, just hating everything around us. So full of testosterone and Winnie and D-balls.
It was crazy, right? But I remember that. Like, I remember it being like, and it was only when it sort of like was put to me on this documentary, I was like, God, it really was like that. Like with the signs like, show us your tits. And like women just being groped left, right, and center. I was like, oh my God. It was kind of that era of like American Pie, and you know, there was so much sexualization, and like men just sort of this huge, like you say, like huge amounts of testosterone self-driven angst that they had. And like kind of sexually frustrated or something. Like it's a bunch of teenagers who wanted to get laid, and like that was all they cared about.
Right.
And
Exactly.
you sort of see it through that documentary, like how the kind of state that we're all in compared to like '69, when it was a very different world, you know, and like that just sort of shows where we've come evolutionarily, like as people, how much kind of hatred there is, and where we've come to in that state of mind. And I wonder what it's like now. Really, it's kind of, maybe we've got a little bit better, because I think because people are trying to be a little bit more woke, and maybe because of the pandemic, people don't want to be like, there's all the Me Too movement and stuff like that has probably helped that side of things. I think that's been a big shift. So hopefully it's gone for the better now.
Well, I got to tell you, when I watch stuff like this, you know, I kind of get sick to my stomach. I'm like, God, was I a guy that grabbed an ass, you know, or was I a guy that, because I know I did things that totally wouldn't be accepted in this world today, especially in the radio business. I mean, I would do stuff that I don't even bring up. Not that I'm ashamed of it, but I'm afraid to get canceled. Just, I was like, it happened 25 years ago. I'm sorry. But you can't use the excuse of it was okay then, because it really wasn't. It was accepted.
Exactly. That you hit the nail on the head. It was more accepted, but it was never okay.
Exactly. Yeah. It was forcefully accepted. You know, I'll even put that in front of it.
But it was also, I do believe, I remember there being, like, amongst men, I remember there being, like, a pressure to behave that way with your buddies. I believe that most men aren't actually like that, and were never like that. Like, I remember never really being, like, I was brought up in by my mum as a single parent. So, like, in terms of, like, my respect for women, I've always had, like, quite a high respect for women. So I never really did any of that, like, grabbing asses stuff. Like, I remember a pressure from mates to kind of do it. Mm-hmm. I remember buddies, like, they would all do it. And I was like, and like, squeeze a girl's arse when, like, she walks past and stuff. And I was like, I never felt comfortable doing it. I always felt odd.
Yeah.
To just do that, because it was just not part of my nature. Yeah. But I remember there being, like, a peer pressure around it, and a peer pressure to get laid. That was like a huge thing. Like, you got to get laid. You can kind of see where it came from with that, like, male kind of, I guess my wife calls it, you know, toxic masculinity thing, because there was a lot of that. That's still around now, but I think there's a huge part of that, of, like, the pressure of what it is to be a man then. And that kind of overtook that.
Well, we were latchkey kids. I had a single mother, a bunch of stepdads, you know, a couple abusive. And we never learned from good men how to be, you know, not to say that we're not good men now or became good men, but, you know, growing up in that environment, that latchkey environment / almost dysfunctional to an extent, is that you're just assuming that's how you should be. And especially if you've got men coming in and out of your lives or your life, dating your mother, and, you know, you just hear the stuff that she's bitching and complaining about. You're going, okay, do I do that? It's very confusing. So that's where I think a lot of it came from. I'm glad that it's going back, you know, because I, like you, total respect for women. My wife is my princess. She's the queen. 10 years, 2 kids, you know, and you know, take the bullet for it. That's kind of stuff. Her before.
Yeah, and I actually think there's a lot of men now that are. You know, I'd go as far to say that I'm somewhat of, like, my wife calls me, like, a feminist now, because I'm so pro women. You know, like, a lot of the movies that we're producing, we're always fighting for the women characters and women to be celebrated, because we realize when you're trying to get movies made, you know, there's so many men that will move the needle financially, commercial viability, to get movies made. There's so many men that do that. And there's only a handful of women that really do. So we're really trying to, like, change that with our movies, and really celebrate women and have, like, real strong female leads and stuff. And you'll see that as we make these movies, you'll be like, oh, that's what Tom was talking about. You know, that's what the kind of thing we're trying to do.
Well, if you need a recently fired radio personality, now full-time podcaster in one of your movies, Tom, just give me the green light, thumbs up, and I'll get on a Spirit Airlines flight and I'll head over to the UK. Always wanted to visit the UK. So
That sounds great. Sounds great.
Well, Love in the Villa, before we let you go. Nate, do you have any more questions for Tom before we let him go? You good? Okay. Love in the Villa, Netflix, out now. Actually, it's like a 50-50, almost 60-40, I would say. Kat Graham, your co-star, is really the lead in this because it's about her first, and she finds you within the movie, but she starts it out. So Kat Graham.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's her story, and it's her, she's the one that sets the whole thing off, and I'm sort of like the thing that puts a spanner in the works, really. So yeah, I'm the one that kind of changes her journey into where she thought this trip was going to go, but it's her trip, but it's all her journey. Yeah.
And I think she actually lives here in Atlanta, if I read correctly.
She does. Yeah, she lives in Atlanta. Yeah, she does.
Yeah, because she's also, like I started out the conversation, she's multi-talented. She's an amazing singer, and she's put out some albums.
Dancer, yeah.
And a dancer. I mean, she's that total package, top 40, pop princess type of thing. So I'm a fan. Look, I'm so happy that you took all this time with us. Love in the Villa. Please, everyone, watch that on Netflix. The Umbrella Academy. I can't quit it. It's just amazing. You did such a great job. I look forward to seeing what you got in the future. Remember us, please. So when that request comes across your email, it says, hey, the Bailey Show podcast. You're like, I'm not doing a podcast. Just remember, we were cool, right? We're good buddies now. So
you're good guys.
Yeah, please come.
I appreciate the time, guys.
All right, Tom. Take care, buddy. Thank you.
Cheers, boys. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.